Well, that cut early, so I'll have to combine the two. But anyways, in the long run, wind will outlast water. I mean, you can look it into, if you want to look into astrology or whatever, astronomy, and start looking at other planets that are arid as fuck, they get a lot of wind still, massive wind. So you won't run out of power using the combination of electricity, or using the combination of solar and wind. But no, when it comes to these others who want to argue with conservatives about this stuff, I tell you folks, each to their own. In the end, if you jump too fast before the technology that we have can efficiently, or can become more efficient in solar absorption, wind generation, all that, because right now they're not even at a 20% efficiency. So with that being said, we have lots of room to advance. We have lots of room to start phasing out old tech and bringing in new tech. It won't displace jobs. It'll actually replace those jobs lost and bring in more. Some of this stuff, I imagine, can be transitional in knowledge, and some of it too. A lot of these guys who work in these power plants are not stupid. So I would imagine a lot of them would be able to transition to these types of technologies. And, being the types to not only help build them, create them, advance them. The list goes on. I mean, you got room to go. And so, in that being said, it allows, it kind of makes liberals happy. These climate change fanatics a little happier that people are becoming more environmentally minded. Sadly, they don't understand the difference between environment and climate. But also, you're not, depending on where you live, you're not paying excessive amounts of on your bills for your utilities. You're not paying taxes on those or anything like that. You're pretty much learning to, like you do with everything else, if you're willing to cut off your Netflix membership to save a little money to go towards something else, this is kind of the same thing. But in this sense, you're cutting off that tax that otherwise would make, the government richer, in essence, for those who are anti-government, while it's making the public a little poorer. It allows you to be able to be yourself and allows you a little more freedom in this sense. I mean, to give a good example, we only pay $625 a month on our house payments. Granted, this thing's been a fixer-upper and it took a year to make it livable, but those who actually have the money to get something better, it wouldn't be hard for them to convert it. The only part for them is if you're in the city, it'd be hard to get a well put in. So you'd probably still get stuck with some level of utility. And then on top of it, we pay about, on average, $10 a month for propane. We only intend to have propane as a temporary thing, simply until we can get our windmill put up, and we want to get another 6 panels at least for our home, because then what we'll do is we'll replace the instant water heater, propane water heater, for a couple of point of use single element water heaters. That way the two will still use about 500 kilowatts less than a regular 40 to 50 gallon dual element water heater. Because on average you're looking at 5.5 kilowatts on a water heater alone. So I mean, with this type of setup, it would mean that we just produced 12 solar panels to power a single water heater. So yeah, that's where it becomes pointless. It's where, just like anybody else who tries to make their vehicles more fuel efficient, all that stuff, there's things that you're still going to have to replace on the vehicle itself to help what you added to it become more fuel efficient, if that makes sense to those who are more mechanically inclined. Overall, I just, from my experience and all that, Yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, it's going to be a learning curve. It's been a learning curve for me. This is our first system, and I've been having to learn as we go. But in the end, we're not spending, on electricity alone. We're not spending what, $100, $125. That's cheap for a lot of people, expensive for others. On that alone, we're not paying, however much on water each month, and we're not paying, for sewer and water. And then when it comes to garbage and everything, we recycle what can be recycled, and what can be burned, and what's left, well, then that will go to that in itself will go to, the local dump or something. But that's, even then, when you start cutting all that down so much like that, you're not really spending a whole shit ton of money anymore. People forget that even in states like Oregon, where I live, you're still paying a sales tax. They don't call it sales tax. They call it a cigarette tax, an alcohol tax, a gas tax, a tobacco tax. They give it a separate name because legally they could not call it a sales tax due to the income tax that we have here. So that's how they get around with that. When you start adding up Oregon taxes, we're already paying roughly 70% tax from paycheck to cash register, meaning you get taxed at your paycheck, then you're getting taxed every time you purchase something, every time you pay a bill for a utility, you're getting taxed. You buy a car, you get taxed. You buy a bicycle, you get taxed. We're an extremely taxed state, and for being so heavily taxed, we got a lot of homeless people here. And that should be going on. I mean, if we're getting taxing that much and these programs are helping them that much, we should be seeing far less of it out on the street, and a lot of them should be getting help that they're supposed to be getting. Democrats love taxes. But once they get them, I bet anything, you only see about 10% of those taxes actually going to something that helps the public. As we're voting a second time for cannabis profits to be used on mental health for drug addictions and rehab facilities, which that was a part of the legalization to begin with. That's what we voted for in the first place. So, yeah, if every year, 4 years, whatever, people are getting more and more living expenses being added onto their incomes that they have to pay for. And it's making it harder for everybody. And people want to talk about, well, this is why we got to go after the rich. But sadly, you turn a cheek to people like Mark Zuckerberg, who's $111 billion in net worth. People like Gates, who are just over $100 billion also. Then you've got Jack Dorsey, if I remember right. He's right around that 20 billion range. So, I mean, yeah, Trump's 2.5, Oprah's 2.5. Republican, Democrat right there. But when you look at values, you want to talk about eating the rich. You guys are ignoring the rich people and actually making them richer. I mean, how hard did Mark Zuckerberg have to work to become a billionaire like he did, other than to steal from a couple people who created the idea of Facebook to begin with? So he got his through stealing, just like Bill Gates did, just to remind you, because he stole a lot of his shit from Apple and other companies. He didn't build his empire on his own personal knowledge. He built his empire on his own greed and stole from other people who did the work. Otherwise, he paid them and took their work and took their credit. You ever notice that the richest, most powerful people in the world actually are the ones who are the most cutthroat? So, yeah, it's to keep you in mind on all that. You need to be reminded. Some of you kids out there who are under 30 aren't even old enough to remember half the shit that, these people have done over the years. And even myself, I'm not old enough to remember absolutely everything. But coming back to this whole off-grid living stuff, like I said, you're going to save more money this way. You're not going to be taking away from jobs. I don't see anything wrong with people becoming more environmentally minded. Conservatives, you don't argue it when it comes to not throwing your trash on the ground or trying not to pollute the soil and all that stuff. Because a lot of you too are farmers, and you understand that once that soil's done, it's going to be a long time before that soil's mended for you to be able to grow in it again. So a lot of you are already environmentally minded. A lot of these liberals are purely climate. They seem to think that we can control the weather. You can't control the weather. You just can't. The government can, whether people want to bring up HARP or some of these other things. It's probably extremely isolated and not enough to actually change climate on a permanent basis right now. And a lot of what we find in the air that people are complaining about is about polluting our environment. So the shit that you pollute into the ground and into the water ends up into the air and being rained down and everything, and that's not climate. That's polluting the environment. Climate is the prevailing weather of a region and location. Then you've got a planetary climate, but that in itself it changes with every location. I think the only climate change that politics are actually talking about is the climate change in politics, because that's the other definition of climate change. Obama spoke a lot about climate change in politics when he was in office. So, no, Republicans, it's not just about the environmental aspect. It's about saving money, not paying the excessive amount of taxes on shit that everybody, in essence, needs to be able to live comfortably and have a happy life, including a happy wife in a lot of cases, too. Which also leads to a happy life. But I hope people understand, especially you liberals out there, you're pushing for communal type solar and alternative energies. It doesn't work. It's pointless. It's insufficient, especially right now. And to reach that, you are going to actually have to destroy environments to provide enough space to be able to provide you enough power for you to be able to charge up your cell phones and go protest every night. It's going to take a lot of fucking power just to power those the cable, the power lines, everything before it gets to your phone to charge it, or it gets to your computer for you to go and cry on, or anything else. Yeah, as you can tell, I'm not very sympathetic to liberals these days. I used to be one. I walked away when I started getting attacked at work. And that's a side story. And that was back in 2015. But you guys need to open your eyes a little bit. You're halfway there. Same thing with the Republicans and conservatives. I look at them, they're halfway there. Also, they want to be able to save money and allow people to be able to afford what they need or want on their own, and not stand there with their hand out and having government titty nipples stuck down their throats. They don't want that. They want people to be self-sufficient, self-reliant. And if there's something wrong with you being able to rely on yourself and being able to do most of what you need to do on your own, it's one thing to help somebody, it's another thing to full-on take over for them and just let them collect, sit at home, do whatever, while everybody else is doing the work to pay for their bills, that type of thing. They've got to at least do something in exchange. It's just kind of how it goes. Nothing's free, ever. It always costs somebody something. And frankly, when I think of the story of Robin Hood, I start thinking about all those people that died in his name in that story, or were affected in his name. And the only people that actually benefited from that whole story was Robin Hood, Little John, Maid Marian, the Sheriff of Rottingham, and King John. That's really it. You really had... can people really name off anybody else from that story? I don't think so. They couldn't name off all the other people that Robin Hood robbed, and they can't name off anybody that he helped. The only people he helped was himself, and those few people. Those are the only people in that story that got rich and got famous in theoretical essence. So I don't look at Robin Hood as a hero. He was a fucking thief that screwed everybody over under the guise of philanthropy. Sounds like other people we know. But No, I have a slight disposition to the right, but I will call them out too. Because I'll tell you guys right now, liberals, Democrats, they're not wrong. In the sense of we need to become more environmentally minded as a country. Reserve the fuel, all that shit for your cars. I know a lot of you like your gas fueled cars. As you can tell, I love my trucks. But at the same time, most of our pollution that we produce in this country is predominantly either coming from our vehicles or coming from industrial work on its own and power production. And if we can cut out certain things, we'd be able to cut that down and start breaking it down. It doesn't mean you have to do away with fossil fuels altogether, because it doesn't make sense to do away with it when we don't have anything efficient enough to replace it. Nothing. And in order to do that, sorry, liberals, this is where you're fucked up and wrong. We would have to destroy thousands and thousands of acres to be able to produce enough power just to run it through the power lines to everybody's houses. That's not counting the usage that each home's going to be using for washing their clothes, washing their buttholes, and washing their dishes. So, most of you are not stupid. A lot of people are not really that stupid. They're so emotionally driven that whether it's their love or their hate, both are just as fucking strong, and both will blind you from logic or using your head. That's why we say don't get over emotional about things, because it clouds your thinking. A lot of people do things with the intent of doing good and out of love of somebody, and in the end, they actually do more harm. I'm surprised you liberals haven't figured that out yet. Conservatives, though, there's a way to meet these people halfway. There really is. When it comes to the environmental aspect. A lot of you who want to deny this stuff and talk about, what about the environmental impacts of this, that, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we're exchanging to an extent of what our power production is, but that power production isn't necessarily creating an up boost of pollutants into the environment with the growth of human population. Because the more people you have, the more power that is needed. The more power that is needed, the more that needs to be produced. And guess what? You're going to be... If we rely strictly on fossil fuels and all that stuff, yeah, we will eventually have to expand those. We would have to expand something. And really, we're getting to a point, we're kind of getting... I can agree, we're getting outdated. Since we have this technology to be able to produce it, we need to start spending money to advance it, so that way eventually we can phase one out for the other. And in that process, find cleaner, better methods to producing the batteries, to producing these different power cells. I mean, whether they're using photovoltaic paints, anything like that, whether it's people who just painting their fucking roofs with that stuff and getting it hooked up, if they perfect that right, you're not doing a lot of damage to the environment. There's more than just solar panels that absorb sunlight to produce electricity. There's photovoltaic paint. There's obviously the panels. There's strips. There's siding. There's all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, the options are there. Because I can tell you right now, if we were to go by the liberal Democrat method, which you guys seem to forget, the next generation is giving the baby boomer generation a run for the money and populace. But I would hate to have to come outside and look out and look straight across to that hill way out there and have to see windmills going across the top of it and panels along the side of it just to catch solar and wind to be able to produce enough power to power up homes in, say, southern and central Oregon. I mean, nobody wants to see that. And putting it on your homes as a point of use, you have an advantage to that. And it's, you're not paying the taxes, you're not paying the services, you're not paying the excess bullshit. Like I said, if you're one of those people who's paying on average $100, let's say $100 a month on electricity, you're spending $1,200 a year, and then 5 years, you're already spending $6,000 in electricity, and a setup that I have, I spent not much more than that. And the only thing I'll have to really replace, unless the panels, unless I have issues with the panel at some point, some kind of, branch falls and breaks on it or whatever, that's a $300 fix. The battery system is the only system that is probably the most expensive part of the whole thing, and it depends on how many batteries you got. I would, like I said, expect anywhere from the $5,000 to $7,000 range for your battery systems, whether you're going 24 volt or 48 volt. Honestly, I suggest the 48, and that's really it. And as long as you keep up on it, it's going to last a long time, just like your cars. How many mechanics out there can get a car from the 1960s, get it running, keep it running like it was brand new as long as they own it? It's the same thing as this. It's just keeping up on it. And, I mean, the work on keep up on it is really not that much. I mean, to go check the batteries, check water levels, do anything like that might take you 30 minutes. And you might have to do that once every, couple months or few months. Same thing with your panels. Just making sure they're clean at least once, twice a week. Washing your windows. You clean the windshields off your cars, on a regular basis, including in the wintertime. So, I mean, I got to get, I got to say, don't knock it until you do it, because I can tell you right now, we're saving a lot of money. I mean, we went from living up in the Portland metro area paying a little over $2,000 a month between rent and utilities to now we pay $635 a month. That's how much we cut our living expenses down. That doesn't include the food aspect in either situation, because that's between two people, that's not a lot. And the fact that we are moving towards being able to move our old farm down here to this property to start producing our own food and all that, again, that's going to cut that all down to milk and cheese and the random pot roast. So, I mean, do the math. Overall, efficiency-wise, conservatives, the cost is a lot cheaper. You're saving a lot more money in the longer run. At the same time, none of these liberals can complain about you not being environmentally minded when they can't even put their money where their mouth is, a good chunk of them. There are people out there who live off-grid, who do live like this, that on that side, so won't knock them, but in the long run, what you see, the people out there bouncing around on the streets, rioting, protesting about all these various things, I bet you anything, 90% of them, if not more, do not live that way, and the only reason why they're off-grid is because they're fucking homeless and can't get a job and hooked on drugs. So yeah, you got a nice little 30, 45 minute little ramble from me between politics and living off-grid. There is benefits to it in every aspect. Quit relying on the system as much as you say you don't, because everybody does. They do. And that's both sides. I'm not talking just conservatives or liberals. Both sides do. They can argue that out their asshole. They do, as long as you're not if you're not producing most of what you're using, then you're relying on somebody else. So every little bit of self-reliance, self-sufficiency goes a long way, and it helps you financially. It'll help in the long run. It might even help your family, because you might actually, instead of spending that extra $100-$200 every month on electricity, that's an extra $100-$200 that you could be saving or using to go on that vacation with your kids, because Lord knows these days, well, a lot of families can barely afford to even leave their towns, and those who can, they should feel lucky. And it doesn't matter what you look like, because a lot of people in every community are stuck in their communities, and it's really hard to leave. Really hard to leave. So, I mean, hope you appreciate this video. I'm not the type of person who goes out and tries to make it entertaining or anything like that. I'm not that kind of guy at all. will speak my mind and share a little bit about what we're doing and all that because this is my dream of being off grid, self sufficient, having my own farm. I'm not looking for a major farm, just something that I can produce enough food for myself and enough to be able to basically just have my own little produce stand. I don't want no grocery store or anything like that. I just want something efficient enough that I can never have to buy any food again as best I can outside of a couple little staples. Like I said, milk and cheese. But be able to sell that excess in exchange to be able to replace what we, planted and harvested and ate and sold, but to also use that excess to be able to live our lives a little bit. I'm disabled, and, I don't know if you can see that. That guy right there. I have NF2, neurofibromatosis type 2. So it caused those tumors throughout my entire body. So I've been trying to make this as self-sufficient as possible. I'm on a fixed income. And if somebody like myself on a fixed income can make this happen, I think anybody else can too. It's a struggle every day. I've got those things growing in my spine, and I'm supposed to have been in a wheelchair back in January. We can't afford spinal surgery. So wheelchair at least provides the ability to prolong my ability to walk, but whether I can walk or I'm stuck in a chair or paralyzed from the waist down at some point, I'm trying to make things in a way that I can afford to stay here on that income and still be able to do the things I enjoy doing, like raising our own food, raising our animals, and being self-reliant. Because I realize that people, especially the elderly and those who are disabled, like myself, in a lot of ways, because of how this system works, is forced to rely more and more on others and more on the system instead of being able to rely on themselves. And so this is my dream at work. It's rusty, it's dirty at the moment. It's going to take a while. I just hope that I can get the extra 6 panels up. I don't have them yet. I've got to get them at some point, but I'm hoping to get the extra 6 panels, and also which I have the windmill already. I just got to be able to get the wind generator up. So eventually I want to get all that in, the greenhouse a greenhouse put in, and the raised gardens all done. So that way, even if in a wheelchair, I can still reach in and work with it. And if I have to crawl, I'm okay with that, because I'm just, I'm a guy, I'm playing in the dirt. But yeah, no, self-sufficiency is important, and that alone is enough to becoming more and more environmentally sound and sufficient. It shuts a lot of these other people up, because a lot of them can't argue whether or not you are, even though for some they're doing it specifically because they don't want to keep paying all the high taxes. They don't want to pay all the excess living expenses, and I don't blame them. So yeah. Anyways, God bless. Vote Donald Trump, and hope everybody stays safe out there. Use your heads and your hearts.